Hello, hi everyone. Myself Yadin Nair of second semester MSW, Lara College of Social Sciences, is starting my presentation on the topic Existential Model of Casework. Like what Albert Camus said, no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me there is something stronger, something better, pushing right back, which point towards the importance of a human existence, which is also signifying the core concept behind existentialism. What is existential model of casework? Existential model of casework is closely related with the existential philosophy, which focuses on helping the clients to understand their problems and making them find the solution to these problems. Where existential philosophy focuses on understanding about oneself and finding the meaning of life, passing through the various difficult stages of life like anxiety, uncertainty, isolation, despair, and death by using the client's creativity, love, freedom to make choices in an authentic manner and also taking up the responsibility of these choices. Existential social work looks into the various stages of client's life and understands how this influences and determines the decision making and coping abilities of the client. The concept of existential casework is being borrowed from existential psychotherapy. Looking into the history of existential model of casework, the existential therapy movement was not founded by any particular person or group. Many streams of thought contributed to it. Drawing from a major orientation in philosophy, existential therapy arose spontaneously in different parts of Europe and among different schools of psychology and psychiatry in the 1940s and 1950s. To understand the philosophical underpinnings of modern existential psychotherapy, one must have some awareness of such figures as Soren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, Frankl, Augustine, and Martin Buber has said. These major figures of existentialism and existential phenomenology and their cultural, philosophical, and religious writings provided the basis for the formation of existential therapy. In 1958, existential psychotherapy introduced to the US with the publication of Existence, a New Dimension in Psychiatry and Psychology by Rollo May, Ernest Angel, and Henry Ellenberger. While in 1981, Yalom published the first comprehensive textbook in existential psychiatry entitled Existential Psychotherapy. Logotherapy, which comes as a subpart of existentialism, which is being proposed by Viktor Frankl, which proposed that life was having purpose even in the face of suffering, where the individuals can find a meaning through their attitude, choices, and action. The primary goal of logotherapy is to help individuals discover and pursue their unique sense of meaning and purpose in life. Looking into the basic tenets, we can see that existential psychotherapy is not a specific set of techniques, as it is more philosophical in nature. The existential movement stands for respect for the person, for exploring new aspects of human behavior, and for divergent methods of understanding people. It uses numerous approaches to therapy based on its assumption about human nature. Existential model stresses on the importance of the client and the therapist relationship and about how the client utilizes the freedom to take decisions of his or her life, being properly aware about self. Existentialism tries to explain about the various conflicts individuals face on the basis of the givens of existence, which are the death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness, which will be discussed in detail in the coming slides. So let's move into the existential therapy goals. According to what Corey and Frankel has said, the existential therapy focuses on assisting the client in reaching authenticity and also making them capable enough to understand when they are deceiving themselves. Understanding or accepting the reality as it is without making the inner demons of one's mind, like that of denying, avoiding, distorting, or sugarcoating, serves to be the basics of existential therapy. This type of therapy cannot be applied for a person who tends to do the above. Assisting the clients in recognizing that they are not fully present in the therapy process itself and in seeing how this pattern may limit them outside of the therapy. Support the clients in confronting the anxieties that they have so long sought to avoid. Help the clients to redefine themselves and their world in ways that foster greater genuineness of contact with life. Increased awareness is the central goal of existential therapy, which allows the clients to discover that alternative possibilities exist where none were recognized before. Similarly, help the client to discover their identity and position they hold in the world, about the decisions which they can make, and also to take up the responsibility for the decisions which they make and only make the client work towards those aspects that is necessary for the client's life. Next slide is view of human nature. According to this, there are basically six dimensions of propositions made in existential psychotherapy, which serves as a core part of existential psychotherapy. And they are the capacity for self awareness, the tension between freedom and responsibility, creation of an identity and establishing meaningful relationships, search for meaning, purpose, and values of life, accepting anxiety as a condition of living, and awareness of death and non-being. Let's move into each of them in detail. The capacity for self-awareness. As human beings can reflect and make choices because we are capable of self-awareness, the greater our awareness, the greater will be our possibilities for freedom as mentioned in the proposition 2. Increasing self awareness, which includes awareness of alternatives in choice making, various other motivations and factors influencing the person to make their choice. We increase our capacity to live fully as we expand our awareness in the following areas. First one is we are finite and do not have unlimited time to do what we want in life. We have the potential to take action or not to act. In action, also, there is a decision. We choose our actions and therefore we can partially create our own destiny. Meaning is not an automatic process. We must explore it or seek for it in order to find out the right meanings. We are subject to loneliness, meaninglessness, emptiness, guilt, and isolation. We are basically alone, yet we have an opportunity to relate to others. We can choose either to expand or to restrict our consciousness because self awareness is at the root of most other human capacities. The decision to expand it is fundamental to human growth. Next one is the freedom and responsibility. For existentialists, being free and being human are identical. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. We are the authors of our life in the sense that we create our destiny, our life situation, and our problems, according to Russell in 1978. We are responsible for our lives, our actions, and our failures to take an action. For those who continuously blaming others for their problems must be challenged by asking questions related to making them understand or realize how making others decide for them has caused them, and also encouraging them to go for other methods or alternative options. Assuming responsibility is a basic condition for change. Clients who refuse to accept responsibility by persistently blaming others for their problem will not profit from therapy. Moving into the next slide, create an identity and relationship. According to Corey in 2013, people are concerned about preserving their uniqueness and centeredness. Yet at the same time, they have interest in going outside themselves to relate to other beings and to nature. Each of us would like to discover a self that is create our personal identity. This is not an automatic process, and creating an identity takes courage. As relational beings, we also strive for connectedness with others. Many existential writers discuss loneliness, uprootedness, and alienation, which can be seen as the failure to develop ties with others and with nature. The troubles with so many of us is that we have sought directions, answers, values, and beliefs from the important people in our world rather than trusting ourselves to search within and find our own answers to the conflict in our life. We sell out by becoming what others expect of us. Our being becomes rooted in their expectations and we become strangers to ourselves. Clients were struggling in this manner must be challenged by giving them questions related to making them realize how they have lost their touch with their own identity and letting others involved in designing their life. The next one is actually a subpart of the previous slide itself. The existentialists postulate that part of the human condition is the experience of loneliness. But they add that we can derive strength from the experience of looking to ourselves and sensing our separation. The sense of isolation comes when we recognize that we cannot depend on anyone else for our own confirmation or sustenance. That is, we alone must give a sense of meaning to life, and we alone must decide how we live. We humans depend on relationships with others. We want to be significant in another's world, and we want to feel that another's presence in important in our world. The therapist can challenge clients by asking questions to examine what they get from their relationship, how they can avoid intimate contact, how they prevent themselves from having equal relationship, and how they might create therapeutic, healthy, and mature human relationships. Isolation is one among the givens of existentialism. Isolation is another important concept. Discussions goes in terms of intrapersonal isolation, where an individual is being isolated from parts of his or her own body, while existential isolation is a kind of isolation in which the client gets an understanding about the fact that each individual enters and departs the world all alone. So existential isolation and interpersonal isolation both are different. One is dealing with the self while the other one is dealing with the others around us. Moving to the next proposition, the search for meaning, purpose and values of life. Meaningless in life leads to emptiness and hollowness, which is called as the existential vacuum. A distinctly human characteristic is the struggle for a sense of significance and purpose in life. In any experience, the underlying conflicts that bring people into counseling and therapy are centered in these existential questions. Why am I here? What do I want from life? What gives my life purpose? Where is a source of meaning for me in life? Meaninglessness, which is another important given of existence, can lead to emptiness and hollowness, or a condition that Frankl calls the existential vacuum. This condition is often experienced when people engage themselves with routine or with work. Because there is no preordained design for living, people are faced with the task of creating their own meaning. Thus, existentialists believe that the major solution to meaninglessness is through engagement. When you are properly engaged, you are actually finding a proper meaning or being satisfied with your life, which involves creating, loving, working, and building. Moving to the next proposition, accepting anxiety as a condition of living. Anxiety arises from one's personal strivings to survive and to maintain and assert one's being. And the feelings anxiety generates are an inevitable aspects of the human condition. Existential anxiety is the unavoidable result of being confronted with the givens of existence, which we have already mentioned before, like the death, freedom, choice, isolation, and meaninglessness. Existential therapists differentiate between normal and neurotic anxiety, and they see anxiety as a potential source of growth. Normal anxiety is an appropriate response to an event being faced. Further, this kind of anxiety does not have to be repressed, and it can be used as a motivation to change, because we could not survive without some anxiety. It is not a therapeutic goal to eliminate normal anxiety. While neurotic anxiety, in contrast, is out of proportion to the situation. It is typically out of awareness and it tends to immobilize the person. Being psychologically healthy entails living with as little neurotic anxiety as possible, while accepting and struggling with the unavoidable existential anxiety or the normal anxiety that is a part of living. Moving to the next proposition, the awareness of death and non-being. According to existential viewpoint, the death gives significance to living. Existentialist does not view death negatively but hold the awareness of death as a basic human condition. A distinguishing human characteristic is the ability to grasp the reality of the future and the inevitability of death. This is necessary to think about death if we are to think significantly about life. From Frankel's perspective, death should not be considered a threat. Rather, death provides the motivation for us to live our life fully and take advantage of each opportunity to do something meaningful. The three forms of being in this world is also being discussed, like that of Umwelt, Mitwelt, and Eigenwelt. Umwelt is based on the biological world around us, while Midwelt is based on the world in which the fellow human beings of the individual reside, and agent world is dealing with the own world which is being created by the individual, that is showing the relationship with one's own self. Our awareness of death is the source of zest for life and creativity. Death and life are interdependent, and though physical death destroys us, the idea of death saves us. Individuals also find out defense to cope with the death awareness, which includes the concept of ultimate rescuer, which is considered as a personal believable servant to help or protect the individual during a difficult time, like that of facing death. Example, the concept of God. Moving to the therapist function and roles. Existential therapists are primarily concerned with understanding the subjective world of the client to help them come to new understandings and options. Existential therapists are especially concerned about clients avoiding responsibility. They invite the clients to accept personal responsibility for their choices. When the clients complain about or blame others, the therapist is likely to ask them how they contributed to their situation, which is likely to create a realization for the client. Coming to the client's experience in therapy, the client will be challenged or persuaded to take up the responsibility for the choices made by the client, which will be based on the major concepts of existentialism, like that of anxiety, freedom and responsibility, isolation, death, and search for meaning, etc. The client has been motivated by the therapist in facing life with courage, hope, and willingness to find meaning to life. Through the process of the therapy, individuals can explore alternatives for making their visions real. This actually comes under the client's experience and therapy. Moving to the therapeutic techniques and procedures, the various techniques used under existential model of casework include: first one is de-reflection. It is used when a person is overly self-absorbed or on an issue or attainment of a goal. By redirecting the attention or de-reflecting the attention away from the self, the person can become whole by thinking about others rather than themselves. It can bring down excessive self-concern and shyness. Second technique is the paradoxical intention. It is a cognitive technique that involves persuading the client to engage in their most feared behavior. The approach can help the individuals experiencing anxiety, fear, phobias, eating disorders, and even depression by encouraging them to face the fear itself. Situational reconstruction is the next technique where the client is being asked to think about three ways in which a particular situation could have been better and three ways in which the particular situation could have been worse, so that the client can think about the ways to overcome that particular stuck. Next technique is the compensatory self-improvement. When things go out of control, we have to work on areas that you have control in. That is compensatory self-improvement. And the next or the fifth technique is the Socratic dialogue, a method of assisting the clients to determine how accurate and helpful certain thoughts may be. Specifically, this is done by exploring how the client came to have those thoughts and evaluating the evidence regarding those and other possible thoughts comes under the Socratic dialogue. Coming to the applications of existential psychotherapy, it is considered to be appropriate for those clients facing issues based on developmental crisis, identity crisis, family or career-based issues. It is also useful in the grief counseling and for those individuals facing low self-confidence, self-esteem, etc. For those having social anxieties, stress, tension, existential psychotherapy can be considered. Moving to the next one is regarding the strength and limitations of the existential model of casework. Strength existential therapy is completely based on the concept of self-determination, where importance is given for the individual's decision. Clients are being motivated to take up the responsibility for their choice. Clients are also being made properly aware about the importance and value of anxiety, guilt, death, and isolation and other concepts in individuals' life. Coming to the limitations, existential therapy lacks an organized set of principles and practices. Writers are using global terms or unclear terms and other abstract concepts related to existential psychotherapy. Very little research has been done in the particular area, which marked the shortage of resource materials. Existential psychotherapy cannot be applied for clients having comparatively lower functioning abilities like nonverbal clients or for those who are facing extreme crisis who needs immediate attention and direction. Next one are the references, and thank you all.